Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Travel Podcast, brought to you by GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Stacey, and today we are talking about Thailand, which in the course of my research made me feel really terrible about how very, very little I actually know about Thailand. I can pick it out on a map. Somewhat. I can pick out the general area, so if you give me a map that has the countries outlined, I know specifically which one it is. But if you just give me a map, like a geographic map that doesn't have country lines, I kind of know the area, and I know it goes down the peninsula, but then it doesn't have all of the bottom, and that's a different country, and yeah. So also, and I'm ashamed of this for two reasons. Thailand is the country where The King and I takes place, but I did not know that Thailand and Siam were the same place until I was somewhere in my teens, even though I've seen The King and I probably at least half a dozen times since I was a child. But B, since a good portion of what I know about Thailand is from The King and I feel really bad about that because it's evidently illegal to actually have anything relating to The King and I or Anne and the King in Thailand. Because the Thai people believe that it's, disrespectful to their monarchy and doesn't tell the story correct, which I will definitely probably agree with on that second one, because it was written at a certain time by a certain person for people of a certain audience, that there was probably some twisting of the stories to make certain things seem more sensational and to make certain people seem better and certain people seem worse based off of somewhat prejudiced notions. But yeah, beyond those things, which we will not mention, I know I haven't even had Thai food that much. I had once a crab fried rice, which was really good actually. And then I've been trying to find a good enough crab fried rice since then and never could, but I actually haven't had too much of it. And then the only other things I know about Thailand are I'm so sorry about this, certain K-pop idols who are from Thailand. So as I was doing all the research about Thailand, I just kept thinking of Lisa from Blackpink. And I was just like, that is one person out of millions. Why are you focusing on? Move on. Get to actual Thailand. Stop doing the everything from Thailand comes from, glitz and glamour television and what have you. So Thailand is a monarchy still. It is officially the Kingdom of Thailand. It is also the country in Southeast Asia most visited by tourists. So this is a bit of a change for me because I don't normally, I try and do the places that tourists don't go all the time. And we mentioned in the last episode that it'll probably be a while before I'm like, let's go to super modern city. Because I like living in fantasy worlds with all my imaginary lovers. But I was like, you know what? I don't fully know too much about the southeast part of Asia. So yes, let's go to the one most visited by tourists. That sounds like a good starter intro to Southeast Asia. So Thailand is somewhat, I wanted to say sold as, but that's not advertised as, let's go with exotic yet safe, cheap yet equipped with every modern amenity you need. And despite all the tourists, still maintains the whatever that makes it Thailand. So as I mentioned earlier, it was known as Siam until 1938 and is the only Southeast Asian country never to have been colonized by a foreign power. And the Thai people are very, very proud of that, which, yes, you should be. That was probably really hard to do. I don't quite know. I'd like to know, actually, the history of how you managed to do that, because not being colonized by a foreign power was a bit of a difficulty. In 1932, there was a bloodless revolution, which led to a constitutional monarchy. And Thailand, along with being the only country not colonized by a foreign power, was also the only country not conquered by the Japanese during World War II. And since during World War II, Japan was kind of conquering these countries to sort of set up its own imperial thing a la colonies, it's like doubly uncolonized, I guess you could say. Thailand, though, because of where it's located along latitudes and the Earth's geography, is hot and humid all year round, with temps ranging from 82 to 95 degrees Fahrenheit, which we may... I know Sarah and I have mentioned this on some podcasts, but I don't know if we've mentioned on the travel podcast. Where we live in Northern California, it can get really hot. Thankfully, not humid, because I think if it was both hot and humid, I would have demanded that we leave and or would have packed a single bag and been out of here the moment I was 18, because I went to Massachusetts once. We were only there for a little over a week, but it was during the summer and it was hot and humid, and I was just like, I'm dying. I'm walking through water, physically feels like I'm walking through water and possibly drowning, and I can't stand this. And how do you do this year in, year out, every summer? This is miserable. So the hot part, I'm kind of okay with. I'm a bit used to the humid part. But I imagine for people who are from places that get, really, really cold winters, a place that seems to never get below 80 degrees sounds awesome in the wintertime. Yes, let's go there. Let's have Christmas in Thailand. So they're probably fine with the humidity. From November to the end of February, it doesn't rain much and temperatures are at their lowest. So this is obviously the most popular time to visit, as I mentioned, especially around the Christmas, New Year's, or Chinese New Year's time. Then from March to June, Thailand temperatures can get as high as 104 degrees Fahrenheit. From July to October, you get tropical monsoons because, again, it's in that area. And interestingly, the southeast coast of Thailand has its rains reversed from the rest of the country. So the peak season is May to October, and the rainy off season is November to February. So I suppose that's the best time to go there, is, again, that whole let's go for Christmas or New Year's or Chinese New Year's, what have you. Mainland Thai culture is heavily influenced by Buddhism, but unlike some of the Buddhist countries in East Asia, Thailand's Buddhists follow the, and I apologize if I'm going to butcher this word, Theravada school, which is arguably closer to the Indian roots of Buddhism and places a heavier emphasis on monasticism, to the point that there are seemingly temples everywhere, and temples are called in Thailand Wat. When we kind of talked about that in the Cambodia episode, if you wanted to go to Angkor Wat, so Angkor Temple, I believe their languages are somewhat connected. But along with that, it's actually almost sort of a, not becoming an adult. What's that like? Where here we have, sweet 16s or quinceañeras or bar mitzvahs, that it's almost a sort of rite of passage for young Thai boys and men to become a Buddhist monk for a short period of time, usually around the 3-month rainy season. Which, on the one hand, if that's sort of part of the culture of all the young Thai guys go become Buddhist monks before sort of becoming real men, the rainy season seems like it would be a really good time to do that. Because, and I don't live in a place where it monsoons, so I'm not quite sure what you would do during a monsoon season besides be aware of the weather and if there's flooding. But if everything's fine and it's just raining a lot, yes, people who live in monsoon areas, please let me know, is there anything specific that you do during the rains, or do you just sort of stay inside more for that period of time? Because now I'm actually really interested in what happens during monsoon seasons. But we're going to take a short break right now. Stay tuned.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. Guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast. Today we are talking about Thailand. So, and I think this possibly has to do with the having never been colonized thing. Thailand and Thai people can speak English somewhat, but not to a large percentage. So research in 2012 found that around 10% of the population are fluent in English, and 32% can speak English at least a basic level, and the age group with the most English speakers is 25 to 34, which kind of makes sense. If you go to Thailand and you're an English speaker, in worst case scenarios, if you need like sort of emergency services, police stations and government offices usually do have English speaking staff. And interestingly, even though, less than a third of the country can speak English at a basic level, public signs are usually written in both Thai and Roman letters, but that doesn't necessarily mean English. It means the word written, because the Roman letters are, used for a number of languages. The Roman letters are usually spelling the word phonetically. So if you read it out, it'll kind of sound like what the word really sounds like. But that can still be sort of complicated, because there isn't actually a sort of agreed upon universal agreement on how to write Thai letters using Roman letters. So the same word can have many variations or spellings depending on what signs you're looking at. Not on the same sign, but like here, it might be on one sign, but then if you bought a map at, a local store or whatever, it might actually be written differently because we haven't all agreed on how to say those, to write those letters using Roman language. Man, I apologize. I just cannot talk today. How to write those sounds using Roman letters. But anyways, Thailand, even though it's the most visited country in Southeast Asia, and so you'd expect that it has a good number of things set up that would, benefit tourists, be set up sort of with tourists in mind. It's actually somewhat well known for having bad driving, and not like bad, like doesn't know how to drive, but bad, like dangerous. So the number one cause of death for visitors to Thailand is motorbike accidents, but driving, whether in a motorbike or a car, can be dangerous at any time. That there are certain times where sort of drunk driving accidents become more prevalent, and drivers just kind of tend to ignore the laws of the road and go down the wrong side of the road and what have you. So they do give some tips about driving in Thailand: to drive defensively. If you're riding a motorbike, wear a helmet, don't drink, and if at all possible, to avoid traveling at night, because a lot of accidents do tend to happen then. Thailand, even though it's generally pretty safe, does have a good number of scams targeted towards tourists. But most are kind of, if you have some common sense, you can usually notice, you get that, there's something wrong here, and you can avoid it. But theft is also somewhat common, especially on buses. So you don't want to leave your luggage or your purse or anything on a bus by itself, because then you come back and there might not be anything. And if there was even a story where the owner or operator or something of a bus company was caught rifling through tourist bags when they were on a break or something off the bus. So just to sort of be forewarned. It's also very important in Thailand to sort of pay attention to your personal appearance, because it's considered a measure of respect to other people to pay attention to your personal experience. So you should dress appropriately, and in doing so, you will be shown more respect. At minimum, your clothes should be neat, clean, and free from holes or tears. But to the specific location in Thailand that I actually would want to visit, and I mentioned this on the last episode, that I kind of like imagining going to older places so I can sort of imagine what life was back then, because I'll at times feel very cynical about the modern world. And of course, life was totally much better back in the day, irregardless of the lack of healthcare and whatever have you. So much better back without all the modern conveniences, of course. So I would want to go to, and I totally apologize because I'm probably going to butcher this too, Sukhothai. Not quite sure how that's pronounced. The name, however you pronounce it, translates as the dawn of happiness. And it was where the earliest Thai kingdom that we know of was founded sometime between 1238 and 1257. And it was the capital for around 120 years. Sukhothai Historical Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Again, this has come up quite a bit for me because I like the more historical places to imagine that I'm in a old-timey whatever have you. But the founding of it being in the 12 whatevers is interesting because Thailand's calendar, not the calendar that we use and that a lot of countries adopt for international things, Thailand's calendar is actually something like 542 years in advance of us. So it's actually like 25 something in Thailand years, even though it's only 2018 when I'm recording this. So I was just like, I want to know where you got the extra 500 years from. What are you dating it from? And what historical events have happened since then? And what historical event happened in this year in Thailand? Like, I just want to randomly know certain thing, like on this day in history, on this day, year in Thailand history, that sort of thing. But so Sukhothai is actually a rather large area. It's got a number of sites that you can visit. But because it has those number of sites, it's over like 27 square miles or something, and it's got multiple zones. Each of the zones has a separate entrance fee. And they used to, I believe, have a sort of all-in-one pass, but may not do that anymore. So you probably would have to pay that entrance fee at each zone you choose to visit. The best time to visit Sukhothai is from November to February when the weather's cooler. So again, that wonderful Christmas, New Year's time. But if you look it up, it's got this great image of this giant stone Buddha sitting amongst pillars, which I think maybe used to like hold a roof or something. I can only imagine what this place looked like in its grand heyday of being the capital. But even with that, the main parts of Sukhothai, the old city, has actually been restored quite a bit since the 1960s. It's well maintained, it's very clean, but some visitors have felt that it's sort of too clean for what's supposed to be a, nearly 800-year city. But there are still parts of it that aren't sort of the main old city part that you can go and still, that haven't been restored as well. And you can still sort of get that old feeling of, this is kind of what it was back then, even with time and what time does to literally everything. So I'd probably want to go see the main city just because that's the main tourist attraction. And again, part of my job to Thailand is most visited country in Southeast Asia. I need to sort of dip my toe in the Southeast Asia tourist waters. But then because, again, I also like to play with my imagination in these places and pretend I'm in a different time or world or what have you, I would also want to go to the quote unquote less sanitized parts just to feel, I guess, I'm imagining without having gone there, that would feel more real and my imagination could take control more and Now, I'm not actually sure if that's a good idea or not, but that would be my choice. But the listener, of course, does not have to do that. If you like the more sanitized, restored history, if you like history being tried to make as much as it looked like then as possible, that's up to you. So we're going to take another short break right now. Stay tuned.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast. The tip for today is actually really useful for people who have listened to multiple episodes of this podcast, just because I know not all of them, but I think a majority of the destinations I've chosen to visit have been UNESCO World Heritage Sites. Because again, even though I did not actually like history too much in school, because I didn't like the dates and I just had a really hard time keeping dates in my mind, I liked sort of the stories and imagining things that were happening at that time. And so if you told it in a sort of story way, don't ask me what year the battle was or what have you. Don't ask me when the Magna Carta was signed. I don't know. But if you were just like, hey, this king, whatever, and this really interesting thing happened, and there was nearly this revolution and blah, 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 that is much more interesting to me. So I've picked a lot of UNESCO World Heritage Sites because they're, historical and based in olden things as opposed to newer things. And so they would allow me to sort of imagine those old stories that 99% of we probably don't actually have written down because people wouldn't either have thought to or maybe not have been able to. But B, may not be true anyways because I wouldn't necessarily know because I don't actually read a lot of history, even though I like the stories. But historically based movies, period movies, I guess I should say, usually do draw my attention. Even if I don't watch them, I'm just like, what's that? Where are you based? And what are you supposed to be telling? But because these UNESCO heritage sites are all generally big tourist draws, because that's kind of half the point of having something designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site, at least for the home country, they can be very crowded with tourists. And so the tip for today, and this applies to Sukhothai as well as to other historical sites, is to try and visit at lunch. Because most people go to lunch at lunch. And so there will be less people there. It'll be less crowded. You won't feel so, squished with tourists there. It can also be, depending on the site, helpful to go sort of first thing in the morning, especially in places that get really hot. So to go not only before the people come, but before the temps rise, or in the evening. But the evening is a bit harder because you don't want to be out necessarily in some places after dark. Like in Thailand, you don't want to be driving at night if possible. And it's a bit like heat during the day, where the morning, even if in the summer, is not as hot as the evening, even if you're about the same distance away in time from sunrise and sunset. because you sort of build it up. So the people aren't there necessarily first thing in the morning, but then they come during the day, and then they just maybe stick around at times. So even if you go in the evening, you might still have a good amount of people who are sort of trying to catch the last things before the day's over. So lunchtime or the earlier time seem like a better option. And then the site for today, it's an interesting site in that it's not, I think it would probably be most useful. It's kind of aimed towards business people, but for travelers, I think it would be most useful for those sort of travelers who are, I guess, a bit more spontaneous and have the means to sort of pick up and go somewhere, not necessarily at a moment's notice, but without the like several months in advance sort of planning, to just be like, well, I don't know, I'm a little tired, and maybe I'll just take my vacation, a couple of vacation days, 2 weeks from now, and go somewhere. Haven't really planned on it, but I might take a trip, just because. Those sort of people, I feel this site would be really useful, because it would be a way to sort of, I mean, A, you could kind of plan on like, hey, which one has the best rate? But B, if there's a place you want to go, but you don't have a specific time for it, you can set alerts for it and then see when it would sort of be financially best to go. And I'm talking around it and I have introduced the site. I apologize. So the site is xe.com, and it is tracking exchange rates. So when I typed in, it was automatically set to the dollar, and you could see how certain countries' currency compares to the dollar, how much of each whatever is worth a dollar, and how much a dollar is worth of what have you. So when I typed in, the Thailand currency is, I believe, pronounced baht, B-A-H-T. When I typed in Thailand to see how it compared to the dollar, it's roughly, when I looked, about 32 baht to a dollar. So take that as it is. But you can use the site to see exchange rates live. They have live exchange rates. But you can also, like I said, use it to set up rate alerts. So if you're like, oh, I do really want to go to Thailand, but I don't want to go to Thailand until the exchange rate gets to a certain amount, and I won't give a number because I don't really track exchange rates. So I imagine the number I give might actually be completely ridiculous and very unlikely to happen. So I just won't. But for, savvy travelers who travel a lot and therefore deal with exchange rates a lot, they might have a better grasp on here's where the exchange rate could possibly go. And I want to go at when would be the best time when I literally get the most for my money's worth. So I'm going to set an exchange rate for until it gets to a certain thing. And then XE will alert you when that happens. And then you can be like, okay, cool, time to go. But it doesn't charge fees, although they're, depending on how you do the transfer, other institutions might charge you fees, but it doesn't charge you fees to transfer money. And you can do that. Again, it's mostly set up for businesses, but I think you can do it if you might happen to have sort of different accounts or buying things internationally. It's got regulated approval in every country they operate in. Now, that's what they claimed. I don't, again, know enough about exchange rates to be able to be like, well, I see you don't actually have approval in Interplace here, because I don't. Exchange rates kind of throw me off. I'm not exactly sure even how they work, because along with history and dates, I did not like economics in school either. I know I'm sounding like I didn't like anything in school, which is not the case. I actually liked school quite a bit before college. But yeah, just economics. Nope. Not my thing at all. So I know we talked about like supply and demand and free market and how the exchange rate works with the dollar versus, what GDP. And I completely couldn't tell you now. Couldn't explain that to save my soul. But if you are a much smarter traveler than me when it comes to economics, and you understand that, they say they have regulated approval in every country they operate in, which should sort of set your mind at ease at, yes, my money will be safe, and this isn't a sort of, there won't be a way to scam me in the same way like I'm not even sure you can legally operate in the U.S. now without this, but it was set up during the Great Depression because things failed, where you have, federally insured bank or credit union or whatever, and your account is insured to such and such a thing, and you have to be, regulated by and again, I don't know what that thing is, but they are regulated. that's reassuring to me for something to meet the approval of regulations. It makes me feel safer, even if I don't actually understand the regulations. So please don't come up to me and be like, oh, I'm regulated to do whatever. If you say it in a really crazy way, I might totally, automatically be like, you're kidding. I know you're lying. What are you talking about? But also, please don't try and trick me. That's not nice. But yes, so XE, way to track exchange rates, live exchange rates. So even if you aren't a regular tracker and you just happen to be going to a country and you forgot to exchange things before you got on the plane and you're like, well, what is the exchange rate right now? What would be a fair exchange rate before I go to the ones here that, of course, will charge a higher price? That would be a good sort of last check to be like, look, I know the exchange rate is this. If you're charging me above whatever, I'm not going to pay it. I'll go find someone else, although you may or may not be able to do that depending on where you're going. But it is sort of a way to see, yes, this is what it is. Or to, if you can do that math in your head, when they quote you a price in the local currency, be like, oh, that translates literally right now to however many dollars, cool, or no, that's way too much, or what have you. So yes, I know that was a bit rambly. I do apologize, but economics, I can't. I apologize. But on that note, we're going to end for today. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.